All right, good morning, everybody. I'm going to get started a little closer to on time than last class. How's everybody doing on this gray day? All right, okay. It's that time of the semester, I understand. Today's class is going to be a little bit of a hodgepodge. We will carry on with a few little tidbits that I didn't get to last class. I was moving really slowly, so we'll just touch on a few more key points in the cargo website builder. But first, we'll chat a little bit about our schedule and where we're at in time for the semester. So we're trucking along. We're in week 6 of DM2. Next week is reading week for you guys, right? Is that correct? Okay. Are you guys going on vacation? Are you going anywhere fun? No, you laugh. Like, no, just catching up on sleep. Okay. So next week, no class, which is great. We'll get a little bit of a breather. After that, we are going to spend a little bit more time inside of Grasshopper. So we're going to flesh out some of your skills working with data in a Grasshopper environment. We won't get too deep into it. We'll try to keep it focused on getting some nice, beautiful drawings out of a Grasshopper environment. And then after we hit March, we'll transition a little bit more into animation and then wrap up with some juicy Blender stuff at the end of the semester. So I've got a schedule up on Miro now if you want to take a closer look at it. Apologies for the late start on that one. But essentially the TLDR is don't come to class next week. It's reading week, as I'm sure you're aware. We'll chat a little bit about your first assignment. So you're all working diligently on your websites, which we'll chat about in a little bit. But we'll also throw in your first assignment into the mix, which is looking at making a drawing, a nice, beautiful drawing, to populate your website with. So we'll kind of approach this assignment with the aim that it will sit nicely on your website and be nice and legible in a web environment. There's no printing involved in this one, so don't worry, no plotter nightmares. But essentially, it's going to be the first of our sequence of large, medium, and small drawings that we're going to shoot for this semester. If we find that the schedule is a little bit tight, we can have a little bit of a chat or a vote about how you're feeling about your schedule. Worst case scenario, we can kind of nix the medium scale drawing and just do a large and a small approach to the semester. But we can chat about that after the break and see how everyone's feeling. But up on Miro, we've got a nice little PDF about our assignment 1. It's very loosey-goosey. Basically, just going to ask you to make a nice, pretty map or some sort of large-scale, zoomed-out drawing or diagram. It's super wide open as an assignment, so you're welcome to apply it to any of your existing projects in your portfolio if that helps you flesh things out. You are welcome to apply it to your studio project, something totally off the books, unrelated to school. Sometimes that can be a nice little palette cleanser. But if you need a little bit more direction, just hang around after class and I can kind of like give you a little bit more of a focused assignment. Sometimes people need a little bit more direction for these things, but it's wide open by design to try to be a little bit more flexible with your ongoing deliverables. So basically just going to ask you for a single drawing that'll fit in roughly this kind of 3:2 ratio. So when you're setting up your drawing, maybe think about using a dimension of maybe 3,000 by 2,000 pixels. So we're going to keep it for the web so we can avoid using printed dimensions and focus on some digital ratios. So just roughly this kind of like 3:2 ratio so that we can compare and contrast each other's drawings. You're going to be assessed on kind of 5 super high level buckets. So are you including an interesting level of detail into this large scale kind of map style drawing that you're doing? So are you including interesting information about the scale that you're looking at? This is largely kind of a graphic exercise, so we'll focus a lot on representation. I'll give you some advice in the coming classes about how to communicate complex information and spatial data in an effective, clear way. Editing is going to be our best friend, choosing what to Include as well as exclude is super important. It's really easy to overload a drawing with too much information, and then your idea or the purpose of the drawing gets lost in the sauce. So clarity is something else we'll be looking at, making sure that things are super clear and easy to read, that it shows up nicely in a web environment. There's some points for conceptual rigor. So is there kind of an interesting idea that you're exploring through the drawing that you're making? And then some nice little bonus points for if you're including some thinking or information about this place or map across time. If there's any way you can start to incorporate how information or aspects of that site change throughout time, then that's some nice little bonus points. Not required, but a nice little attaboy for you at the end. So the format of this assignment is just going to be a nice little PNG drawing. I think you could do a PDF, but that might, depending on your setup, it might upload to your portfolio a little bit funny. So you can try a PDF, you can try PNG, whatever works best for you. We'll try to keep the file size reasonable. 20 megabytes is a pretty hefty file, so we'll try to keep it well under that maximum file size. With all assignments, I'll just ask that you label your file with your name, your first and last name, and then the assignment. If it just makes it easier for me when I download all of these things in the back end. But essentially, I'll just ask you to upload them to your desk on Miro. So there's no Canvas situation involved. Just throw it on your desk as we proceed, and we'll go from there. There's kind of a couple of rounds of iteration we're going to look at. So today is Friday the 13th, very auspicious. After reading week, so I'll pop over to our schedule over here. We are up here. You'll have reading week to kind of like percolate and think about it. And then our first class after the break, I'll ask you to have a quote unquote draft thrown up on your desk on Miro. That doesn't have to be a drawing at all. It can just be what you're thinking about pursuing. So maybe it's a source of data that you're looking at for your map. Maybe it's a quick sketch. Maybe it's some screenshots on Google Maps. Doesn't have to be super rigorous because it is kind of a quick turnaround. And then the week after that, we'll ask you to throw up a quote unquote final drawing from that information. So we'll have a chat on that Wednesday. We'll kind of go through what people are thinking, and then I can walk you through how to crank out some beautiful drawings without too much pain and suffering within that kind of 1 week turnaround or timeline. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Yeah.
Is there an expectation for us to use some GIS software at some point going into this role?
That's a great question. So that's absolutely an option for you that I would recommend looking into, but it's by no means required. I'll walk through a couple examples. You're more than welcome to do more of a loosey-goosey interpretational kind of map, or maybe more of a diagram style, as long as it's this kind of quite zoomed out perspective. There's no requirements on scale, but it's more at the scale of a map than the scale of a axo or a plan or something. There's a couple examples in this PDF. If you just toggle through, I've included some little precedents you might want to check out. These are obviously done by professional people, so they're probably at a level we're not going to shoot for in this class, but just to get the idea of the kinds of subject matter we might be looking at. There's an example from Lateral Office here. They do a lot of really interesting architectural research on the Arctic and have some great books about it. So this is an example of a map that's starting to layer in temporal information about one of their proposed interventions, which is, gone. Okay, that's okay. If someone deleted it, please put it back. Anyway, I'll just drag in another PDF of that one. That's okay. We forgive you. It's okay. It happens. I should have locked it. Here we go. Here's another one. So Lateral Office is a cool precedent. Another map we can take a look at. This is Studio J. Scrutins. That's that website that I was trying to load the other day that took forever because it had videos on the homepage, but they do amazing, beautiful maps of just taking data and communicating it in a quite beautiful way. We'll spend the next couple of classes looking at different strategies for working with spatial data. I know a lot of you have a background in GIS, so we won't belabor the point too much, but we'll explore different strategies in Grasshopper for maybe transforming information in ways like this. So using kind of geometry to communicate interesting aspects of the data that you're working with. So this is a great precedent. I recommend just their work in general. Studio Juiced Virgins. They just do really beautiful, lots and lots of beautiful, stunning kind of diagrams and maps at a similar scale to what we're going to be looking at in this assignment. So they're really great. Another one that's worth checking out. What else do we have in here? So this is an example of a hand-drawn map from the 80s. So you're welcome to hand draw this assignment if you so choose. It's from OMA, competition plan, but just using like really lovely pastel drawings, using color as a way to communicate information about what you're proposing at a large scale. Super interesting and pretty. And then the last example is from a project that was done in Detroit in the 60s and 70s. It was like a citizen geography project, so equipping local communities with the tools to map and track aspects of their day-to-day existence in the city, and then looking at these kind of like radical, interesting mappings of capital flight from the urban core out to the kind of like white flight suburbs. So anyway, you can take a more diagrammatic approach to your assignment if you so choose, if that's helpful for what you're interested in studying. But that's where we're going. Any other questions before we move on from general assignment overview? Yeah.
It says on the deadline April 4th on the assignment sheet, but on the schedule it is mentioned.
Oh, that's my bad. Sorry about that. Please ignore that. I was tired and forgot to change it. So we'll trust the schedule more fully than any written details. This should be correct. Wednesday, March 4th, up at the top. So we'll go with March instead of April. Thank you for catching that. That's a good one. Any other questions or typos that I've made? Yeah.
Do you have like compare two maps, or like what is that like multiple maps on like side by side, or should it all just be like one?
Oh, amazing question. I would love if you did multiple maps and wanted to compare them. That's a great way to show change through time. We can chat a little bit about like maybe that drawing becomes a GIF that like toggles back and forth, or maybe they are side by side. There's web applications where you can have like a slider too, where you can like slide from one drawing over to another drawing, which is kind of cool. There's some good plugins that we can take a look at. So great question. The answer is yes, please do that. Any other questions? Okay, I know you guys are busy. I know you're overwhelmed, so this isn't like a huge mega ask. The hope is that there's a bounty of spatial information out there that you can pull from and start to layer together, and then we'll spend some time in class after the break looking at how to make that nice and pretty and turn it into some beautiful drawings. So if there's no more questions, we'll move on to just wrapping up some of the cargo website stuff. I guess I'll pause for a second if there is any more questions. Okay, cool. So last class I was moving really slowly. Sorry about that. I was a little bit brain dead. But we'll just touch on a few more key aspects of cargo before we jump to some Grasshopper land stuff that might help you with your assignment. So last class I mentioned that some people are interested in looking at the carbon and environmental impacts of the web. The internet is this like nebulous, unreal thing, but it has very massive literal impacts on material and the real world. So there's some interesting resources here if you're looking at the sustainability of building things on the web. It's just something to consider. The carbon calculator is kind of an interesting way to, you can just plug in your URL and it'll tell you how much carbon it takes to load your website, which is a little overwhelming, but there's a way to reduce the footprints of the things that you do. Low Tech Magazine is a really interesting, I just kind of love their work in general. They do a lot of interesting articles and publications on investigating technology. The link hopefully should be in there. If not, maybe I'll just Google it, Low Tech Magazine. But one of their strategies for making their website a little more low carbon is you can see the images that they have here are all just kind of like reduced file size. They're strategically kind of dithered in certain ways to make the file size of those images really small, which is quite cool. It's a solar powered website. They have a literal solar panel sometimes, or somewhere in, I think, Spain, that controls whether or not this website is powered or not. So we've got some stats about the server down there, which is quite interesting. Anyway, just something to think about as we're talking about digital space. It does have like real physical impacts on the world. A few things I wanted to note, again, kind of on this subject of images and file sizes when you're working on putting your portfolios together. Just some guidelines and rules of thumb for sizing things, uploading them to your website to keep those load times relatively quick. So for the type of content that you're uploading, you're going to probably want to take a slightly different approach to the type of images that you are producing. For things like photos and renderings, those are lots and lots of pixels. They're raster-based images. They are more, more painterly than vector line drawings. You're probably going to want to stick to JPEGs for those ones. Those are a great file type for keeping the file size minimal while still retaining lots and lots of those pixel styles of information. So photos and renderings, you might want to stick with JPEG. In general, for file size, when you're playing around with the size of things in Photoshop, and if you would like more guidance on this, please let me know and we can chat about this in class, just controlling the size and scale of your images in something like Photoshop. You probably want to stick to a max dimension of around 2,500 to maybe 3,000 pixels, kind of on the long edge of your image. So if it's landscape, that bottom edge, or if it's portrait, those side edges. Anything over 2,500 to around like 3,000 pixels might start to get a little bit large. So these are kind of good guidelines for when you're sizing things that will read nice and crisply on your computer without being overly heavy. And this is just like a loose guideline. There's no rules on this whatsoever. If you can keep it under 2 to 3 megs, that will help the load time significantly. Under a megabyte, and it's going to be nice and quick. So the smaller the file size, the faster it loads, but it's always a trade-off between quality and load time. So you'll have to play around with that for yourself. For things that are more like drawings or line work, where you really want to preserve that kind of like vector information as much as possible. Again, I don't know about the status of like uploading PDFs on the internet, but those tend to take a while to load. So I would recommend using PNGs for your drawings. PNGs preserve a little bit more of vector information, more so than a JPEG. So any type of line work and stuff, I would recommend trying a PNG. PNGs are great also because you can export with a transparent background. So you can have your nice, beautiful line work, and then maybe the background of your website is like bright purple or pink, and the line work will sit on top of that instead of having a big white box in the background. So something to think about. The other thing to flag is the color mode. So do you guys know the difference between CMYK and RGB? Okay, most people do. If not, Google it. Please try to shoot for using RGB color modes for things that you're uploading to your portfolio. In general, this might be different than what you've been doing for school because CMYK is great for printer. But if you are going to convert between the two, I recommend doing it inside of Photoshop yourself instead of like uploading a CMYK image directly to your portfolio, because it might just like make some changes for you that don't look super good. So anyway, there's a translation from one color mode to another, and sometimes colors can get really gross and icky moving between RGB and CMYK. So just keep in mind, if you know that something is going on your website at the end of the day, you might just want to start in RGB from the beginning. Okay, the other thing I will mention that I forgot to mention in every single class that people have asked me about and I keep forgetting to mention is how and where to use this student code to launch your website. So I'll go to my cargo.site and I'm going to launch my Sarah's Pretty portfolio. So without taking the step of actually making the site public, I think my whole cargo situation already is in the like launched status. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this, but there should be a button that says make this site public. When we click on our nice big globe icon. And this is going to control whether or not your site is published at all. So without going through this process, you can make all of the edits that you want, but this probably isn't going to be a live website that other people can access. So for example, I think there's a couple of links on Miro, not to pick on anybody. Actually, these look good. This one. So if you follow a link and it prompts you for like a cargo login, that's because this website hasn't been like quote unquote published or made public. So it's still behind private lines within your personal login. So in order to publish and make that website public, there is an option under our globe that says, I think launch site or make public. When you click on that, it'll pop up with this big scary like pay me interface where it'll beg you for your credit card and stuff. Don't put that in. That's not required. There's a tiny little hyperlink down at the bottom below all of the credit card information, which again, I don't think it's going to let me do because I've already done this at some point. But there should be a little hyperlink that says code or discount something. I don't remember exactly what it says, but there's a little option to type or click a little hyperlink for our student discount code. And once you follow that link, you should be able to plug in our nice little student code in there, which I'll just leave up on the screen for a second. So basically ignore the credit card stuff, look for the tiny little hyperlink, click on that and plug in your student code, and then your site should be nice and live. And from there, you should be able to share your little URL. So this little cargo URL, you can copy and paste that and send that to whoever you want, and it'll be public. People can access it without having to log into your personal cargo account. Does that make sense? Does that work for everybody? I think I'll just pause for a second so we can all give that a shot. Is anybody having any issues with that?
And you mentioned that you could add a password so that only certain people have access to it. How
Yeah.
does that appear? Like, what do you, like, if you were to go to someone's website, they have to just enter a password at some point? Or?
Yeah, great question. So that's in the same little globe tab here. If we scroll down to the bottom, there's an enable password protection option. If you check that on, it'll prompt you to type in whatever password you want to use. So I can use my password, maybe will be hello. And then once you hit publish, if I go to my website in like an incognito tab or something, a new window, beep boop, Sarah's portfolio cargo.site. It'll prompt you. Oh, maybe I need to hit publish one more time. Save password. There we go. It'll look like this. So there'll just be like a big enter password thing. So you'll have to give them the password you want them to use. In this case, it's hello. You can hit enter and then you're in.
Can you see how it's on format? Can you try it, please?
Yeah, let's give it a whirl. If you want to test it out, an incognito tab also works. Let's take a look. Jacqueline, look at that! What a beautiful.
Those bottom ones are mine, but from the photos that I took uploads,
Amazing. Okay, this looks incredible. Good job. Is this a template that you're using?
yeah, basically
Okay, this looks really great. I feel like the 3-layer scroll is working so well. And great job uploading your images. These look like a great resolution. I can still read the content, but it didn't take a million years to load. So this looks really, really good. Well done. Let's take a look. Let's creep other people's portfolios. If you want to upload a link to your desk, it looks like a few people have them up there already, which is great. We're gonna noodle around and see what's what. All right. Okay. So
there's another thing, but maybe not mine.
okay, we'll skip you. Let's go to Annika. A nice little password. Oops, I can't spell. There's no capitals. Okay. Amazing. Annika. Lovely. What a nice, clean website. I love it. Did you build this from scratch? This is your own? That's totally fair. How did you find the process? Is it all making sense? Is there any sticking points? Yeah, that is going to be the bane of your existence forever. I find that the columns is the best bet I've found for like having things aligned, because there is that like underlying blue grid. If you can try to like snap your columns to the same grid lines, but otherwise it is a push and pull, annoying negotiation. So. Oh, okay. It looks pretty good to me. If there could also be some settings with padding on the columns, or it's called like a gutter. There's spacing in between, and sometimes that like pushes or pulls depending on your padding settings. So we can take a look at that in a second, but this looks very pretty. I also wanted to mention that on Cargo you can hyperlink to images. So I think last class I just did an example where we had some text. So down at the bottom here I had like a little link that navigates to the next page. I'll also mention that you can link to images. So when people click on an image, it will bring them to a different page in your portfolio if you so choose. So I can click on this little picture, click on my little link button, and then link to whatever project in my portfolio I want to. So that's another way you can have people move or navigate around your website. That looks good, Annika. Well done. Let's go to Roselle. Do you have a password on this one? Roselle. Oop. Looks good. Good start.
Yeah, like I think the images are taking a while to load. It's yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, so I think something I've found that also helps if you've played around with the size of your images and it's still taking a while to load, sometimes just putting a little note in the text, like slow to load or something. I found that decreases friction. If people know that something is coming and they're like, okay, there's gonna be a picture here, then that's a nice little workaround that like erases some of the friction that might come from images taking too long to load. This is really, really pretty. This is a great example of like super clean, great job editing down to only what you want to talk about. and the images are really super compelling and very beautiful.
Yeah, I was kind of unsure if like the different aspect ratios worked. Yeah, I'm still unsure. Cause yeah, they're all different sizes.
I think there's two roads you could go with that. You could manually go in and make them all consistent, but I feel like I don't know, what do you guys think? I feel like the different aspect ratios kind of works for me because they sit on their own. They're all their own images, and I feel like if you cropped them to all be the same size, you would like lose a fair bit of information. What do you guys think? I don't know.
I like the way it is.
Yeah. I like it too. Saves you some work. That looks really good. Well done, Roselle. Archon. Is this one going? It's private. Okay, we'll come back. Let's try Ethan. Mysterious numbered website.
It's just a template. So
Oh, cool. I like this template. It's really pretty.
I did try different features on demo one. Yeah.
Whoa!
But I was just playing it.
I like it.
Very nice.
Very memorable. I won't forget this one shortly. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting effects that Cargo comes with. It's cool that you're exploring with those. I think that's under the little star icon up at the top. So there is rotation, there is blink, which just kind of like makes something toggle on and off if you want it to like catch people's eye. That's one way to do it. Eye roll is kind of fun. It like tracks the movement of your mouse across the screen. It'll like rotate whatever object you have to track wherever your mouse is going. Draggable is fun too. I've used this one before, but it just lets people like pull an image around the page themselves when they're visiting your website, which is kind of cool. Anywho, I like the rotation effects that you're exploring there. That looks great. Yeah, fun template. I'm excited to see where you go with that one. Are you having any issues with that one or just playing around?
I just kind of started.
Cool. Yeah, it looks good. Okay. Let's go to Taluja. Here we go. And pretty please. Good password. Open sesame. Pretty please. Oh, this one's beautiful. I think you're showing me this one last class. Another great example of kind of like a split screen scroll situation. So we've got some fixed info on the left-hand side and then scrolling through the projects on the right. This looks so nice, so beautiful. Very clean. Yeah, this is great. So this is a great example of like linking through images. So you've got, you can click on the pictures and it brings you to a separate page with more info, oh, beautiful. These are lovely drawings. Okay, amazing work. This is you're done. You've like done your portfolio. I'm very proud of you. Yeah, I think, oh, and you're embedding video as well. Awesome. So this is working super well. I think that the interface is super clean and clear. It's really easy to understand what's happening. You've got little read more links at the bottom. So giving people a couple different places to click is a really great example. And I think the separate pages for separate projects works really nicely. So there's kind of like a high level view that we get on the landing page, but then you can click into a project and explore it a little bit more. So I think this looks really great. Did you run into any challenges when you were setting this up?
At first I was really struggling figuring out how to move the pages within the page.
Yeah.
I'm like you said, because I heard just drag stuff around, so.
Yeah.
But otherwise it's good. I need to reduce file sizes, and it takes me time to like crop everything so it lines up. I wish it was like
I know.
crop in the website feature. Otherwise it's good.
Yeah, the consistent width of the images is super nice. That looks really great. Even though they're different heights, I think that still like reads really cleanly. Super great. Okay. Well done. Okay, nice inspo. Very organized. I like your desk too. Looks good. Okay. Oh, we were taking a look at Daniel's website earlier. Sorry, what was that portfolio? Nice to meet you. Good password. Oops. There we go. So this is a really cool, this is like you've got some loading effects on some of the images, which is really nice. I think this can help like smooth the buffer time or the loading time. It can add like a little sleek transition into those images appearing on the page. Sometimes the like sudden burst can be a little bit jarring. So that's a nice little effect to turn on. I think that's an option under, I don't remember where that is. Ask Daniel where that option is.
Just did it on its own. I don't know what it
Okay, amazing. Ask and you shall receive. So this is a really great example of playing around with the kind of more like, there's columns at play, but then there's also a little bit more like free form proportion going on. So this is a really cool composition that I think sits really nicely on the page. I think that the scrolling through and like getting a story about you is really cool as well. So it's kind of a like narrative experience interwoven with your projects, which is a really fun kind of way of exploring. This is a beautiful drawing also. Well done. Yeah, very cool. So this is a good example also of a footer down at the bottom of a web page. We'll talk about in a second some overlays on websites. I think I missed this last class, but having something like pinned to the top or bottom that can then stay there as you scroll through, which is very cool. This is wild. Did you make this?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
On Photoshop.
Wow.
Like I would paint on Photoshop basically. I learned from a guy who was in there that was very nice piece.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, what an amazing skill.
Those were like a manuscript that we published.
Oh, cool.
Just heart surgery stuff.
Just heart surgery stuff. You know how it is. Yeah, I think this is a really cool structure for you specifically because you do have such a fascinating, like non-traditional background. I think kind of walking people through your story is really smart and very cool. So this looks really great. I think it's also interesting to start layering in information, kind of like CV information. So like these are some skills that I have, and then linking it to some drawings or models or photographs that you have already. Great. And it looks like you guys have really strong skills in model photography as well. Seeing that across a couple portfolios, which is awesome to see. Nothing will catch an architect's eye faster than a pretty model photo because architects miss making models. It doesn't happen as much as you would hope in professional life. Okay, great job, Daniel. This looks really good. Anyone else? We looked at check, please. Okay, maybe we'll pause there. Thank you for those who I got to pick on today for having links on your desks. I'll just touch one more time quickly on the idea of an overlay. So this is my beautiful website. One type of setting that we didn't play around with last class on our little page stack or page browser here. We looked at sets and we looked at stacks and we looked at a home page. But there's also an option if you click on the little dot here. There's one that says pin and there's one that says overlay. And we can play around with what these two different options do. I'll start with pin. So if I click on pin, this one gets a little bit confusing, but essentially what you can see this one does when I pin something to my page, it just kind of like takes that home page and it tacks it over top of what is beneath it. So in this case, my home page is sitting on top of this images page underneath. So the pin kind of, it's almost like trace paper. It'll just like stick it on top. And when you click on the pin, you can control if it sits at the top, if it sits down at the bottom. So if you're pinning it at the top of your page or if you're pinning it at the bottom of your page. And then there's a few funny little options for how that object is pinned. So if I click the lock icon, that will fix that in place. I always get confused between pinning and overlaying. So I don't know an amazing way to explain the difference between them, so I just highly recommend that you play around with these settings yourself. It seems to be a little bit hit or miss sometimes, but just know that this exists. This is a good way to layer a little section or chunk over top of other information. So my little header, for example, Sarah's Wonderful website, that can stack on top of my images page underneath. This is good for like a nice little website heading if you so choose. So maybe up at the top I'll have my name, Sarah. I can add in a nice little column. So I'll add in some columns. I'll put my name on the left-hand side of the column. And then on the right-hand side, maybe I'll put a little menu toggle or something. So there's a little section over here with these arrows that have some nice baked in little icons, which can be kind of helpful. So from here I can choose one of these little burger menus or icons that people can click on to open up a separate little menu for them to work with. So using my columns, I've got my name on one side and a nice little hamburger on another side. I can link this hamburger to anything that I want. So maybe I can make an additional page in here. Make a new page. And this page can be my little unfolded menu, maybe if I so choose. So I can add in more columns, and this can have a whole bunch of links for people. So maybe projects, about, I don't know what other kind of links you might have in here. And what I can then do is go to my home page and have my little hamburger menu link to that little navigation chunk that I've just created. So that's one way you can kind of like toggle between, start building like a header and a footer down at the bottom. Something else you can do is, instead of using this pin icon, you can use overlay. So again, under the same little ... there's an option here for overlay. And this one you can see what it does is add a little, in this case, it just kind of controls like what is similar to pinning something. So if it's pinned at the top or the bottom, you can see now my content is sliding underneath or below my little fixed piece here. So tricky to explain clearly, but again, just like pinning, I recommend you play around with these different settings and explore what an overlay does versus pinning an object. So you can see the overlay, what's happening here. My content can like slide around underneath while these objects are fixed, versus if something is pinned, then it is kind of like pinned in place with other contents overlaid. Not super clear, but basically just wanted to flag that exists, and then you can kind of play around, toggle things on and off, and see what the different effects are for your personal site. It's a good way to add in a header and a footer and any other sort of like navigations that maybe you want to be visible all the time or pinned in place. And combined with sets and stacks, you can build a little bit more of a clear navigational structure. So use those sets effectively to keep things grouped. If something is pinned and you drag it into a set, it'll just be pinned kind of within that little chunk of projects that you're dealing with. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about with cargo. Is there any other questions or issues that people have come across putting things together that you want to discuss before I move on? Okay, amazing. So there's no fixed deadline for your web portfolio. It'll be something I'll evaluate at the end of the semester, so you're welcome to keep plugging away at it in the background. It seems like some of you are already almost done, which is incredible. But feel free to make any changes as you go through the semester. We'll be, in an ideal world, you will be able to upload your assignments to your website as well, and so we can see how those start to look in your portfolio environment. But just something to keep in mind so it doesn't like sneak up on you in the last minute. Putting this portfolio together up front will kind of help you later on in the semester. So I think that's it for this class in terms of cargo and website building. We're going to pop back into a grasshopper thinking environment to help kind of tee up our next assignment a little bit better. Before we get back into a Rhino grasshopper headspace, maybe I'll start to open this one up in the background so we can transition into Rhino and grasshopper. I'll just pause and ask. I know that Thomas's module and my module and Zach's module in module 1 probably got to different places with spatial data. So I'll just ask if maybe a show of hands if you guys got to the 3D buildings with Thomas. Okay. Amazing. So if you were with me, you did not get to 3D buildings. So I might have to just do like a speed run on that one, or maybe send out a little YouTube tutorial link to cover how to take building footprints and extrude them up into 3D space. So you guys got to that content. We did not. But that's something kind of in the background if you're interested in modeling 3D building environments from spatial data. That's something we can do in Grasshopper, and that some of you already have the expertise to do. Today we're going to look at 2D data still. We're going to keep it two-dimensional, but we'll just look at how Grasshopper can start to manipulate and work with spatial data in ways that can help your representation style, maybe then in ways that other GIS software might be a little bit more challenging or less intuitive. So I'm going to open up Rhino and I'll open up Grasshopper. And what we're going to do is look at a few more data sets from the city of Vancouver. Specifically, I'm going to be looking at the trees, the street trees file that the city of Vancouver has available. And we'll use this to make some pretty and abstract informational drawings about using some of the data that's available about those trees. So I'm going to go to the City of Vancouver Open Data Portal. I'll try to upload the file to Miro as well, but God knows what's going to happen there. So we'll go to City of Vancouver Open Data while we've got Rhino open in the background. And I want to start building a map that looks at the trees in the city. So I can type in trees into this little search portal. And there's a couple of different data sets that come up when I look for trees. Community gardens and food trees might be kind of interesting to us, but for today, I'm going to focus on this public trees data set. This is by no means a list of all of the trees in the city, but it does include public trees. So these are trees that the city is stewarding and taking care of. it says here private trees are not included in the inventory. So it's good to be aware of the limitations of our data. But if we pop over to a map, you can take a look and see what's going on here. A whole bunch of big numbers. But if we zoom in a little bit, you start to get the sense of what this data set looks like. So we've got a whole bunch, thousands and thousands of little pins. And each one of these pins represents a tree that the city is taking care of. And if you click on each one, you can see there's actually a ton of information about each tree that's available in the Open Data portal. And this is basically just kind of like an example or a diagram of the kind of information you might want to track down for your assignment. There is so much information and spatial data available on the internet. Street trees are just one type. There's all kinds of interesting geographic data sets for different aspects of ecology, geography. You can Google things like bird migration, GIS, and find all kinds of data sets about live bird migration maps, bird migration tracking with ArcGIS, all sorts of different data sets about anything you can kind of dream of. I can look for, what are they called? Maybe something like active oil refineries, if you want to get critical about oil and gas in Canada. Anything you can Google, there might be a GIS repository that we can start to grab from and work with inside of a Grasshopper environment. For this assignment that we're going to be working on, you're also welcome to use any GIS software that you're more familiar with if that's easier. But we'll just go over an example today of how to take this data and turn it into a pretty little diagram. So I'm looking at my street trees. It's got some interesting tree names that I've never heard of before. Pissard plum, I like that. And I'm interested in drawing a little section of the city and how those street trees, maybe different species. If I look at the data set more closely, you can see there's all kinds of information, including the height of the tree in meters, the diameter of the tree trunk. So this is all information that we can translate and make visual to understand more about the data set across our little map. Yeah, I've got a question.
Do you know any places where we can get like true drip lines for Vancouver? Because for example, this data set doesn't include that.
I haven't found any. I've looked for them before and I haven't had any luck. Sometimes you can make assumptions.
Yeah.
You can kind of like, if you know the species of the tree, you can do a little chat GPT, like given the height of this tree, what is an assumed ratio of like height to drip line? So we'll touch on that. Maybe we'll look at an example of how you can like take one type of data and like translate it into something else based on some assumptions. But no, I haven't found any drip line stuff.
I've just been asking everybody.
I know. It would be amazing to have. Yeah, exactly. So depending on where you're looking, the data available is going to vary wildly. So great question. Drip line is just kind of like the outline of the branches of a tree traced on the ground. So that would be amazing to be able to represent. In this case, we don't have that available. What we do have is the height of the tree and then the diameter of the trunk, which for the city, that's what they're interested in. They're interested in kind of mapping the maybe respective health of the tree through the trunk of it. Who knows what they're doing. But for my purposes, I want to export a little chunk of my map here. If we come over to the export tab, this is an example where there is too much information to be able to download it at once. The city can't handle that amount of traffic, so we have to select a smaller piece of this data before we can start to work with it. So I'll pop over to my map, and maybe I'll grab this little Vanier Park just on kind of around the corner from Kitts Beach, because there's lots of little trees in this area. We can probably make a cute drawing from here. So I'll grab my little square, click and drag and select an area that I'm interested in. Pop over to export. And now it'll let me export only the selected 1,000 or so records. Again, never forget, change the coordinates from WGS84 to EPSG if you want to be able to take measurements that are close to reality from your file. So we're going to choose EPSG from the dropdown, and then I'm going to download only the selected 1,000 or so records. I'll try to throw this up in Miro. We'll see what happens. Boop, boop. Public trees. Yeah, no, it's not going to let me do that. So hopefully you're able to get to that one on our own. I will navigate to my little downloaded zip folder. Maybe I'll put mine on my desktop for a sec. And I'll make sure that this is unzipped before we do anything. So on a PC, you're going to have to right click and extract these files. Same as the process for contours, building footprints, any of that good stuff. And we've got our usual suspects in here, our nice public trees files. I'll pop back into Grasshopper and start a new file. So I'm going to be using the same process that we did before. Over in my At It tab. Should be familiar with this process at this point. We're going to import our shapefile. First things first, got to bring in the file we want to work with. So I'll grab a file path component. I will navigate to where my shapefile is saved. So I'll right click and select one existing file. Find my way to my public trees shapefile. We'll open that one up. And plug that straight into my shapefile path. So this is nothing new. This is just what we've covered last module. We'll grab a light switch, so a Boolean toggle, to make sure that this component will run. And we'll double click on that one to make sure that it's set to true, so that what we get coming out the other side is a list of all of those trees that we are importing here. We've imported our shapefile. Now we have to display the information inside of it. So we'll come back up to our Add It tab and grab the data viz component. So again, exact same workflow as everything else we were doing with contours, buildings, etc. We'll plug shapes into shapes. Features, we're going to plug into get value of feature. And then we can reduce, reuse, recycle the same Boolean toggle from before to make sure that this component runs as well. So we'll plug Boolean toggle into true or false. And then what we should have showing up in our Grasshopper environment is an indication of the location of those trees. If you can't find this information in Rhino space, if you're not seeing anything, it's just because it's really far from the origin. So we can pop back into Rhino and type in ZE for zoom makes sense. And that should bring you in nice and close to our trees. So we've got our trees brought in as tiny little points. If you zoom in, each one is just an individual point. And this could be a drawing on its own, I suppose, just having the center points of those trees. But maybe we want a little bit more information to start to represent those trees a little bit more of an interesting or compelling way. And so now we can take a little bit of a deeper dive into the features that are coming out of import at it. So our very first at it component, I'm going to grab a panel and take a look at what's coming out of features. So I'll double click and type in panel. Again, a panel is just like an empty container for information. We can plug in our features into that panel to take a look at what's coming out of it. So if I plug in features into an empty panel, you can see I get a list of information. And if I zoom in on this one, there's some interesting stuff coming out here that maps directly onto our different categories of info from the City of Vancouver. So I'm seeing categories of information like address, common name, species, height of the tree in meters, diameter in centimeters. So these features here map precisely to the different, categories of information associated with each tree from the City of Vancouver. So we've got address, common name, genus, species name, etc., height and diameter. So what we're seeing here in Grasshopper is essentially just that top line, the header of all of those different columns of information. And this is useful. It's really helpful to see this list because from this list, we can grab the relevant information to start to make some drawings or assumptions based on the data available about those trees. So if I come back to my data viz at it component, this is the feature that's drawing all of my nice little points. If we hover over point, the little point output here, you can see this is where all of my little dots for each tree are being drawn. There's nothing coming out of polyline, there's nothing coming out of polygon. It's just little points that's being created. And we can also take a look under attribute values. So ATT values. If I grab another panel and look at what's coming out of this node here, attribute values, you can see I get a big, huge list of information. If we scroll through this list, you'll start to see all kinds of stuff. So we're seeing species, we're seeing height of trees, we're seeing type of trees, addresses. And it's organized in such a way that if we compare it to our features, or just the headings, the different categories of information that's available in this shapefile, we can draw a line and compare and contrast between our types of information and how that information is coming out of our attribute values on the right-hand side. So in Grasshopper, this is kind of an annoying or not super interesting aspect of data management, but it's kind of important to note. You can see there is a dashed line coming out of attribute values. So this line over here is dashed, this little wire. What that means is that our information is stored in what's called branches. So when we have a solid line like this one, so our features, our list of features, a solid line just means that all of our information is on one quote unquote branch of information. So there's only one of these kind of dark bars up at the top here. These dark bars are indicative of a branch of information. And a branch is basically just the same thing as like a group or a cluster or kind of like a set on our cargo website. A branch is just a specific group that we're interested in dealing with. So when we take a look at our attribute values, so this is the information about each tree, you can see that there's actually more than one of these dark bars. As we scroll through the list, you can see there's a whole bunch of them. And each one has its own unique number in the top right-hand corner. And that number is referring to an individual branch of data. If this is confusing or not making too much sense to you, all you have to really know at this point is that each of these dark bars and the information that sits underneath it refers to an individual tree. So each tree, the information about it exists on its own quote-unquote branch, indicated by these dark bars. And the structure of these branches are mapped precisely to what we see on the left-hand side here. So these are our features. I'll rename this one features. And if we compare the list of features, so the different categories of information, if we draw a line from one over to an example of a tree, you can see they're mapping directly from one to each other. So if we look at height underscore meters, if I draw a straight line over to an example of one of my trees, you can see it's giving me a number here, 13.7. That means that that's the height in meters of that tree. If I look at the diameter underscore centimeters, so what's the diameter of the trunk? If I draw a straight line over, I can look and see 45.7 centimeters is going to be the diameter of that trunk. And similarly, the species, I can compare, draw a line over, and it's giving me the name of the species of that tree. So each one of these different categories of information has a little number on the left-hand side that corresponds to a little number for each piece of information about the tree. And that's how we can grab information, how we can start to pull out different pieces of what we want to start to map onto our individual trees. Does that make sense at a high level? Okay. We've got categories of information, and then we have a list of all of our trees with the specific information for each tree. So let's say that I want to grab the height of each tree that we're working with. If I take a look at my features here, I can see that I'm interested in the height in meters of each tree. And if I look at the little number to the left of this is what's called the index number. Index just meaning place in the list, order in the list. I can see that the height in meters is number 6. So when I'm looking at my big list of trees, over on the right-hand side, what I'm interested in grabbing from every single one of these trees, I want to grab the piece of information that's sitting at this number 6 spot. So index number 6. That's going to be the height of every single tree. No matter which tree I look at, if I go to grab number 6 in the list, that's the height of the tree at that point. So I've got my big mega list of information about each tree. And I want to grab the 6th item or piece of information about each tree. And I can do that using a component called list item. So I'll double click and type in list item. This one is also under set, list, and then list item. It's the very first option in our list. This lets you feed it any sort of list of information or geometry. So I'll plug in all of my juicy info about all of my trees. Plug that into list. And then from here, I can tell it which index number I'm interested in grabbing. So in this case, if I want the height of the tree, that's number 6. I want to grab the height for every single one of these trees, so I can tell it this index number I'm interested in is number 6. You can double click on your canvas and type in the number 6 if you so choose, or however you want to go about creating the number 6. You can also grab another panel and type in 6. I'll plug that into index. And then you can see what's coming out the other side. If I grab another panel, what I should have is a big fat list of numbers. And you can see it's just giving me the height of every single one of these trees. So you should have a big fat list of decimal numbers corresponding to the height of each tree. Is that working so far for everybody? For those of you that made it to the building extrusion aspect of Module 1, this will be kind of repetition. For those of you that were stuck with me, we're a little bit slower, so we didn't quite get to this aspect of working with data. Now that we have the height for every single tree, we can start to work with our information and make some, start making some drawing moves in Rhino. So I've got every single point, kind of base point for every tree coming out of my data viz component. And maybe I want to draw a line for each tree that represents the height of it, so we can start to get this kind of like understanding of how tall different trees are across the city. So maybe I'll draw a line. And there's a couple different ways to draw a line. Like anything in Grasshopper, there's a million ways to go about it. But I'm going to come over to the Curve tab and take a look at our primitive dropdown here. There's a whole bunch of different options, but I'm going to choose this one here, line SDL. Line SDL. And this one's great because it doesn't need too many inputs. SDL stands for start. So where do you want to start drawing a line from? Direction, what direction do you want to draw your line in? And then length, how long do you want that line to be? Any guesses what we can use for the start to feed into our line SDL? Points, yeah, great job. So we can grab the base points for every single one of our trees. That's coming out of data viz. We'll plug point into start. If you zoom in, you can see we're starting to get some little baby lines drawn at every single point. Every single one of our trees here should have a tiny little line. Direction, by default, that's set to up, or the Z direction, so we actually don't need to change this at all. By default, it's already moving in the right way. Yeah.
If you wanted it to go in a different direction, you do that. You just like handle it with X, Y, Z or something.
Great question. So if we hover over direction, you can see the icon for it is a little arrow. And so anytime you see direction in Grasshopper, that's the same thing as a vector. A vector just meaning like a linear direction in space. So you can come over to the vector tab. There's a million ways to build a direction in Grasshopper. We come over to the little drop down under vector here, the defaults that are cooked in, so X, Y, or Z, these unit X, unit Y, or unit Z are great to plug in. So I can just grab any one of these little presets. So maybe instead of going up, I want the trees to go sideways. I can grab unit X and plug that into direction, and now it's going to draw every single one of those lines horizontally for me. You can also build a custom direction yourself using vector XYZ. So you can plug in different numbers to negotiate. You can also just grab a empty geometry and then vector container. So if you just grab a little empty container, we can right click and set one vector in Rhino. So a little bit more intuitive. You can see it'll prompt you with an arrow, and then you can just kind of click to define the direction. And then the direction will automatically update to whatever direction you drew in Rhino. Good question. But for now, it's drawing them up, and I like up as a direction for us. So I'll leave direction empty. And then for length, this is where we can come back to our height data, grab the output of list item, and plug that one into length. So the height for all of our trees, we can plug into length. And now you can see what we've got is, whoops, a cool map of the different heights of all of our trees across the city, or within my little map zone here. I can preview off all of the little points that we're seeing. They're a little bit visually distracting. So I'll grab everything before my line SDL component and preview it off. And then we're just left with kind of a visual representation of the height of those trees, which is kind of cool. There's some little stubby ones over here, so cute. And then just a reminder that whatever units your Rhino is in, that's going to be the units that Grasshopper is working with. So if I come over to my description, over here it says height in meters. So when it's giving me a number, let's say 7.6, that means 7.6 meters. But since I'm in millimeters in Rhino, it's only drawing them at 7.6 millimeters tall. If it's just for drawing, that's like not necessarily to take specific measurements from, that's fine in our case. It's all relative, so any other spatial data that you bring in will be kind of relative to that dimension. Just be cognizant of the different units that you're working with. So for example, we've got the height of the tree in meters, but if I move down to the diameter of the tree, you can see it's listing that one in centimeters. So just be careful. If I change the input for my list item here, so when we feed it the number 6, it's grabbing the height, but if I toggle this over to 7, that is grabbing the diameter in centimeters. Now I've got this funny condition where it's extruding each line by the diameter, but just keep in mind that these values are going to be in centimeters. So if you want to translate it to meters to be kind of like respective of the same units, we might just have to use a little multiplication component to make sure that those centimeters are working in the same units as the rest of our drawing. I'll stop there. Maybe next class we'll take that diameter information and start to draw some little circles around each tree so we can have a cute little top-down map. But that's where we'll stop for today. I'll stick around if you have any questions about your assignment, your portfolio, or working with translating data into drawing in this form. But otherwise, have a lovely... Oh, yeah, sorry. Question?
I'll ask.
Okay, no worries. Have a... Yeah, another question.
Could I get a photo of the
Of course, yeah. I'll take a little screenshot and I'll drop it on Miro. No problem. Copy. Beep boop. Okay. Have a great week. Thanks, guys. Hello.
Hi. If you download your GIS data and you have all the points of the trees, if I wanted to represent them not on those points,
Mhm.
but as like obviously you're like building the polygons or something. But if I had some, I was trying to do this over the weekend where I
Oh,
took
yeah.
like a tree file and wanted to represent in those places. Like, can you represent the data or like change it from points to? Maybe that's
Absolutely.
exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're one step ahead of me, but that's a great, very perceptive of you. You can take all of those different points and move anything to those points. So
Yeah.
if I had like a little box, for example, that I wanted to represent certain trees, I can bring that box into Grasshopper using like a little geometry component. And then you can, since we have all of those points, you can use a move component to move your representative geometry, whatever you want to stand in for a tree. You can plug that into geometry. And then we just need to kind of measure the distance from somewhere on our starting point to all of those trees. So let's say the word vector 2 point. So the point you want to move from, so like somewhere on our geometry, I can just like right click and set one point. Boop. And then the point we want to move to, so all of the points for our trees. Take that vector, plug it into motion, and then you have a box. Thanks, guys. Representing those trees. You can replace that box with any kind of drawing. I'll go over this in a little bit more detail in another class, but yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I guess maybe a better question of like what I'm trying to get at is like, can you, like if your data was like all polygons or polygons, like could I like read something out as points and just to like have them as points immediately, or do you have to like exactly, I don't know exactly what I'm trying to ask. But I think of like in GIS, like if you have like a bunch of like polylines, then you can like select just essentially points like within them and then represent all the data as points. And I guess I was wondering, like maybe how you do that, or I guess I was thinking maybe you could just like if I have a data set of polygons and I want to just see them as points, can I like plug something in the point and then make it just like work, but maybe
Absolutely.
okay.
You definitely